Hey guys, so there's two things I wanted to talk about before we get started with today's video. The first is the fact that we now have video intros. We have a video intro specifically for the Babylon cast and a video intro specifically for Thinking Out Loud. Both of these intros were produced by the absolutely lovely Joshua Amaranto. You can go ahead and give him a look-see here. I just plastered his information on the screen for you. He's absolutely wonderful. He did a fantastic job on these intros, and I can't recommend him enough. If you want him for commissions or something around that nature, be sure to give him a look-see. He's wonderful. He's fantastic. He's brilliant. Every possible positive word that I could describe him with, I will describe him with that word. The second thing that I want to talk about is the fact that we have merch. So if you're interested in a Thinking Out Loud mug or a Traveler's mug, as you can see back here, or maybe even a hoodie, go ahead and check out the link in the description of the video below, so you can go ahead and get some cool swag. That'd be fantastic. Anyways, those are the two things I wanted to talk about. Oh, I guess one other thing, if you're interested, I've been sort of making appearances on the Atheist Republic Patreon group meetings that they have over there on the Atheist Republic YouTube channel. So go ahead and check me out there if you want to hear my thoughts on topics such as the Black Lives Matter movement, trans rights, really topics that I would generally be too concerned about talking about on this YouTube channel, but they really pull these controversial opinions out of me on this YouTube channel. So go ahead and check me out there. Otherwise, you can, as usual, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. I just recently put up, I guess there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that I really wanted to talk about before we get started with the video. But yeah, I just also started a new Instagram channel called Babylon Project YT, so you can follow me there. If you want to get a glimpse into my personal life, go for it. I can't imagine many of you would actually be interested in that sort of stuff, but if you are, go for it. Anyways, thanks for listening to this short intro, and I hope you enjoy the video. You used to have a podcast, right? What
I
did you
did.
talk about? What did you talk about?
So it's called the In the Know podcast, which started out as a joke between me and my friend who started it with me, who we can talk about now, but is now like an ex-friend due to everything happening in the world in terms of polarization. But we can save that for later. The podcast focused on a lot of things. I would talk about my life in ultra running and hiking in the mountains of Colorado, and like, I don't know, I just tried to be honest about mistakes I made and things like that. And then I ended up doing some fundraisers for ex-Muslim organizations, Free Hearts, Free Minds, and Ex-Muslims of North America. So I did 200-mile races where I raised money for them. And so that sort of got me an in to that community. And so I had a lot of well-known ex-Muslims on my podcast, like Ali Rizvi, Sarah Hayter, Yasmin Muhammad. So that was pretty cool to get to talk to a bunch of inspirational like heroes, basically.
They really are. I mean, like I remember when you and I first met Kilian on the Secular Jihadist podcast, we were chatting together in a forum, and I know that In the Know has been quite a project because you've been in several discussions with people about what was then known as the regressive left, but what is very, very popularly known out there in the mainstream community as the woke culture, and how you would get lambasted by trying to bring nuances to political topics. And unfortunately, the three of us, I believe, we're all relatively liberal here, but when we try to bring up points of contention that even touch upon nuance, people think automatically that you're right wing. Everything right wing is automatically lumped in with the alt right nowadays, and we get screamed at for being racist. And I know you've had a lot of experience in this area, unfortunately, which I'm really sorry to hear that about some of your relationships. It's got to be rough.
Hey, it's okay. I mean, it was tough at the time for sure, but the experience of like losing friends over ideas was what almost beneficial in that. It was just like, wow, this is just a religion, It's like the cult of social justice, woke culture, whatever you want to call it, because it's like it behaves in the exact same. And talking to those people is so similar to talking to a fundamentalist religious person, because there's no breakthrough on the first step. You can't even get to a point where you could, like, 2 + 2. There's no equals 4 to make math happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I always go back to Robert DiAngelo's White Fragility. So I went through the unfortunate instance in which I wanted to read that book, and so I read it. And talking about the religious parallels between Wokistan, I guess, and any fundamentalist religion, is that they never address the premise of their argument. So in White Fragility, the first chapter, Robin DiAngelo explicitly states that she's not going to defend the idea that racism is systematic and it has pestilentially spread throughout just about every institution you can think of. She's going to go off of that assumption. And right there, you're like, you can't just immediately have a whole thesis based on an assumption that you have not proven. It's very much like having a conversation with someone like Jordan Peterson, where he's talking about the meta-ethics of religion. He's talking about the power of these narratives. And like, that's all fine and dandy. Oh, and the whole idea of truth. I'm like, yeah, that's fine and dandy. But you need to first prove to me that these texts were mandated by God in the first place. Otherwise, there's no even, what's the point in even having this conversation? So that's what I've noticed reading Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility. Have you ever gone down that rabbit hole, like Kimberly Crenshaw, Robin DiAngelo?
No, okay. Well, the Kimberly Crenshaw rabbit hole I've been down a little bit. I mean, my university, I went to American University in D.C., which is a very small liberal school. And if you didn't hear about Kimberly Crenshaw, you were really somehow you like didn't go to class, period. So I mean, like, the intersectionality theory, while being valid on its face, I think is sort of like communism, where it sounds really nice when you talk about it in this like cloud of ideas, but then when you try to institute its idea into practice, it becomes all sorts of terrible. But I've been down that rabbit hole, I would say, in terms of it was almost taught like dogma, So there was no. I look back at some classes as sort of a light brainwashing of everybody in there of these kind of ideas, because I mean, opposition was not allowed,
right.
Like actually wasn't tolerated. So I've been down the rabbit hole, but I have been trying to pay a little bit less and less attention to some degree, because I think your mental health suffers if you get too deep into all of this.
Yeah, I can definitely testify to that. I've had to try to generally wean myself off of social media recently, because I'm just getting angry at just literally everyone on left wingers, right wingers, just on social media. But I don't like to use this word too often, but like I think the idea is just coming out of White Fragility, and the way it's infecting a liberal culture is just absolutely evil. No, and I don't exaggerate when I say that, because I mean, have either of you two seen the documentary about that Mike Nanya did about Brett Weinstein's fiasco at Green?
I haven't seen the documentary, but I know all about Brett Weinstein.
I watched most of it, and I've recommended it to some people to try to hopefully let them know just how poisonous White Fragility is, because she doesn't go out to prove that the systemic racism exists, and she just makes the assumption that everyone is by their very nature racist, and if they ever reflexively recoil at the suggestion that they very much are, then that's in which they say something like "I'm not racist," then someone just responds like, "That's the very idea that you reacted that way is proof that you're somewhat racist," and which is ridiculous, because if that's the case, then anything and everything is racist, which means nothing is racist, and so you get this really pernicious argument, this pernicious loop where people can just accuse you of anything, especially if you're white, that you're a racist, which is ridiculous.
Well, that's the actual argument, is that everybody is racist.
Right.
Well, at least all white people are racist. That is literally what was said and taught in class. So, I mean, it's not the argument, I think, from like the majority of the left, if you want to group that whole thing together. But it's an argument from academia for sure, I think.
Oh yeah, that just by a white person's very nature and participating in the systemic structures that prop up racism, you are a racist yourself.
Yeah.
This is
I
it's
heard that a lot.
it's so strange. So like, white fragility is supposed to be that knee-jerk reaction that white people have when they're confronted with their racism, and it's so funny because it's just like, if you accuse anyone of racism, it doesn't matter what their race is, they're going to react
Yeah.
like it has nothing to do with the fact that they're white. And so this is why there was a great article written about white fragility. I think it was on Quillette. It was either on Quillette or Aereo, and it talked about the epistemological problem of white fragility. And there's a huge problem with it. I mean, so we've sort of dismissed intersectionality, and Kilian, you mentioned that intersectionality in a vacuum sounds like it works. It works, right? It works.
Well,
on
and
paper.
it makes sense. It's valid in the sense
Sure.
that you're right. Like, I don't know exactly what you're experiencing right now.
Mm-hmm. And you can back it up with genuine studies out there that prove that there's biases, and these biases and these viewpoints and these personal experiences that people have interlocked, and people with different experiences can have different interactions with other people based on those experiences. So it sounds like it works. But what do you think the problem is? Why doesn't it work in practice in the same way that communism doesn't work in practice?
It doesn't work in practice, I think, because, and I'm going to quote Sam Harris because I think he has said it best. It's because if you put your hand on a hot stove, you're not going to hold it there any longer than I am. So even though our experiences of the world are different and shaped by many of the social patterns in our life rather than biology, I think that it's very obvious that there's a giant chunk that's biology. And so saying that we have nothing in common, is incorrect. So I do know to some degree what you're experiencing now by the virtue of us both being human.
Right.
And B, it has the effect of, in a time when all of our differences are being emphasized in a variety of other ways, it has the effect of saying that not only are we different, but we are so different that we have no way of even really communicating. Like, that's basically what they say. I was told you can never understand the experience of a colored woman. I guess to some degree that's true, but if I can never understand that, then you're not going to convince discompassionate people who struggle to relate to somebody else to actually relate to that person by saying it's impossible to relate to them.
Mm-hmm. And that's also just pure poison, because all three of us have spoken to Ali Rizvi, and sometimes he shares a story about, like, I think this is back in the 1980s, where homosexuality is not as widely as accepted as it is today. Someone made a great point on the internet that when we watch movies like what was the one with Tom Hanks, the one with where he played a gay man? It was.
I'm thinking of Milk, but that was Sean Penn.
No, it wasn't. I mean, like, he I think he was in a movie that he played a dying gay man, and he was being discriminated against, and he had a black lawyer. I think it was, I forgot who the actor was. I want to say it was Denzel Washington, but that's irrelevant right now. He gave a incredible performance in this movie in the 1980s that I think Ali said, like, it really, really moved him. It really, really stirred feelings of empathy, because you're seeing a portrayal of the struggles of another human being who, although he or she is not like you, the very fact that we share a common humanity means that we can empathize with what it's like to, I don't want to be treated that way. I don't want to be looked at differently because I'm a skin color, have a certain sexual preference or whatever. We share that tie that ties us all together, and to say that we can never understand anyone else's experience, that's one of the major that's part of the damage that intersectionality is doing to us as a people right now, because it's splitting us apart. Because it's like we're treating each other as completely different species, or or members of some kind of caste system in which you have a certain group of people who are untouchables, and you can never it's leading to articles in the New York Times like, can my children, written by someone who I think she had some black children, and she actually wrote an article in the New York Times, can my children ever be friends with white people? I'm like, what the hell is that? I mean, like, we should be bringing people together and not
So
splitting them
against
up by race.
MLK, isn't it? Like,
It's totally against MLK. It's the idea that we're judging, the very idea that we judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin is what he was all about. And
yeah.
this is awful.
Can I hop on the Tom Hanks thing real fast?
Yeah.
So moving performance of a gay man by a not gay man. Problem, right? I mean, if we were in this woke left paradigm, then that performance wouldn't have happened. I think it's crazy to think of the people who think like the woke leftists, right, are Nazis. They're all racial essentialists. They're biological essentialists. If you want to say, like, they think your gayness defines you. All of these things, they're playing the essentialist cards, which seems so opposed to the message that you would hear if you literally just heard their words in like opposition to what we were saying here. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a deceptive little game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it already happened with that one television show, Big Mouth, right? Where the woman who played, I only saw season 1, and I didn't watch season 2 or 3.
The young black girl, yeah, I don't remember her name either.
Yeah, the one with braces. She stepped down because she said that a black woman should be the one playing a black girl. And it's so strange because for me,
they're not even really playing a black girl. It's an animated show.
It's an animated show. Yeah, it's not like she's doing blackface. It's digital blackface, as they probably word it. But it's one of those things where, like, for me, whenever I think about what I envision society being in 100 years, not necessarily a utopia, but a protopia in the sense that we're making incremental progress socially, economically, scientifically, whatever metric you want to use. For me, and it's become sort of a meme on the far left, the idea that anyone wants to be colorblind. It's like, well, we want to be colorblind in the future. 100 years down the line, of course we want to be. That's the goal. And how do you best reach that goal? By pretending that people who are colorblind or claim that they're colorblind are completely blind to the injustices that are done on behalf of white people? Or by actually acting colorblind? Like, this is why I'm so worried by the conversation surrounding race in the United States. We're beginning to focus so much on the perceived injustices that is going on. Like, on the one hand, that's cool, that's good, right? We're becoming more aware of the plights of African Americans, of the plights of minorities, what they have to deal with. That's fine, but on the other hand, the problem that I have is that if you look at the data that is coming in when it comes to perception towards minorities, when it comes to how racist the United States is, it's always possible. It's always positive, right? Whether you're looking at the amount of hate crimes going down. In fact, the only people whose hate crimes had an uptick was anti-Semitism. And interestingly enough, those anti-Semitic hate crimes occurred in blue states, not red states. But whether we're looking at the traffic that racist and alt-right websites are getting, or the amount of times that racist words such as the N-word were searched on Google, it's all going down. Racism is going down. People are scoring higher on confirmation bias tests. For me, it's like we're already on our way towards this post-race utopia or protopia that people like Thomas Chatterton William talks about. And if we're already on our way, and now we have this huge halt where we're having to have this conversation about race, and we're focusing so much on race. Now race is the topic of every conversation. I'm worried that this is going to set us back.
It has already, I think.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and not even with the whole idea of calling white people racist. Now white people are the people that are being prejudiced against. Not even just that, but the very fact that we're now being conditioned to view people of color, such as myself, as victims. This creates a whole new dimension to the idea of victimhood culture based on race. And so I'm like, we are so... It's annoying because when I look at the data, I'm like, we were getting there. We were on our way. We were doing good. And now we just hit this huge wall, and it's only going to make things worse. And I will say, they have good intentions. I empathize with their intentions. But but it's an annoying conversation that we have to have, because not only will you get called a racist for even bringing up this topic of conversation, but you understandably elicit very strong emotions on the other side, because they'll say something like, how can you possibly be ignoring a whole group of people that are telling you that they're suffering? This is what Armin was accused of by an ex-friend of ours.
But they're
And
ignoring. Yeah. Keep going. Sorry.
oh, that was basically it. It's like, and to me, that's the hardest argument to go around, because when someone tells you that, look, the whole black community is telling you that they're suffering, they're telling you that they need better conditions. How can you be ignoring that? That's a hard argument to maneuver around, right? And you can't see something as simple as, well, the whole evangelical Christian community claims that they're being under attack, that Christianity is under attack. Does that mean that it's correct? It's a hard thing.
There's a lot of ways to dive into this conversation with what you just said. I'm gonna take one part of it real fast, and that things are getting better, and we are thinking more and more about race. This makes me it's so confusing, right? But part of me thinks that the media has figured out how to keep people angry at each other, and that's useful for the type of corrupt capitalism that we see in the U.S. now. And so this whole situation leads me to think in places that I'm not comfortable, like conspiracy thinking. It's just crazy what's happening, because it all seems too perfect. Things are getting better, and yet we see every now and then, at the perfect time, a video of a black guy getting killed by a police officer is released. And I don't mean perfect time in that it's a good thing, but I mean perfect time in terms of to cause the most amount of societal upheaval. And that seems to happen over and over again. So I'll leave that there for a minute and then come back to it's hard to know what to do about any of it, isn't it? I mean, because I don't know about you, but you feel stuck in the middle and assaulted from all sides. Mm-hmm. Mars, you'd started to say something too.
That's because I mean, what you were speaking about earlier, Vince, it's hard to talk about issues that are surrounding ethnicity or race, because I mean, America has been through has had so many civil rights struggles. Like, we've been through a war to abolish slavery. We've had the civil rights movement. We've had as recently a movement to give homosexuals the right to marry. And right now we're trying to push what Michael Shermer push the expense of what Michael Shermer would call the moral arc. But because it's such a sensitive issue, whenever you bring up race in any kind of subject, you will almost always get a knee-jerk reaction from people from all over. And if it's ever controversial, like if you're ever running a thought experiment, people will sometimes think that the easiest and probably the laziest accusation you can level at someone is that they're racist. Recently, Vince, you know this. I saw people getting really, really antsy over the coronavirus because Asian Americans have more hate crimes leveled at them now because of COVID-19, and people want to go after those racists, which is a good thing. But being an Asian American man myself, I noticed on social media people starting to say, like, don't make references to China in these ads, because you'll be hurting the sensibilities of Asian Americans. You'll be helping turn up anti-Asian American sentiment. If you say something like that, then you're a racist. And a friend of mine had actually criticized China's president and some of the policies of the Chinese government, and she was called a racist. That whole check your white privilege, that whole check your white privilege thing. But China is throwing Muslims into concentration camps. They're trying to intrude into Hong Kong's sovereignty. They need to be held accountable for that. And they're what these when these people are overcorrecting, they're once again stacking yet another layer of difficulty on top of very, very important discussions we have to have about race. A discussion that adults, good, responsible people can have that will come up with solutions for whatever racism or issues we have in our society. But because it's so PC, and because there are real issues, and because we can't address them unless we speak responsibly about them, we've set a fair amount of good. We've set the environment for a flashpoint to happen, and that flashpoint been triggered so badly by by BLM that right now we can't talk about it at all. At a point in time when we have to be talking about it, and everyone's saying, no, you got to be sensitive. Well, you know what? I'm sorry, no. It's important. It's important to be sensitive to people. I agree, but when sensitivity is going to get in the is going to interfere with the establishment of laws and social practices that will have either good or deleterious effects, you have to talk honestly. And here we are in this whole mess. People are just clamoring that they want to defund the police and say, well, we don't want to defund the police. No, some people actually say, we mean defund, we mean abolish. And now we're in Minneapolis has defunded the police department, and now we're in a huge mess because we can't speak honestly because we're so PC about it. And PC has led us to this very, very, in my opinion, dangerous point in our history. And who knows where this is going to go.
Well, can I answer, Vincent, your question you asked, just to speak honestly for a minute about what do you say
go
to
for it.
People who say, well, the black community is telling you they're suffering. And this is going to sound like whataboutism, but it's really not. There's so many people suffering. I mean, I think I spent a lot of time in West Virginia in college because that was the nearest place to go hike, really, when I was in D.C. And it was just so sad. Like you'd find heroin needles on trails and stuff, like motivated junkies getting out on the trails. I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Just like that was just a joke. But it was rough driving through these towns. You know, they were really dead, super poor, and you can tell it's this like broken landscape. And so I'm not saying all of those people there are the most sympathetic of characters, but what I am saying is it's hard to tell them, look, you have to swallow the white privilege pill because everybody else who's not white and poor is suffering more than you, because it doesn't seem that way to them. And maybe it's not. I don't think it's pointless to sit here and try to measure the amount of suffering some people are feeling, because it's all terrible, you know. The heroin epidemic hit West Virginia super hard, but there's lots of people like that who, if you are raised to watch Fox News every day and believe that that's true, you are getting this. Basically, I'm not saying that this is the actual message. I'm saying this is what they will think it is. You're getting this anti-white racist message. You know, that's what you think the left is. So who are you going to vote for when it's Hillary fucking Clinton and Donald Trump? You know, who are you going to side with when it's the police or black people who are, even if they're not the ones rioting on Fox News, they're the ones who are depicted as rioting. You know, you have this twisted up vision of the world, just probably a little more twisted than people who watch MSNBC, but not by that much. And so I think that your whole world just is, you know, a completely different one than the one that we are talking and speaking in right now, because their set of facts is nothing like what we would think is the actual set of facts. You know what I mean?
I think this is why I think it's very important talking about political polarization, where it really is unfortunate that the people who are on our side when it comes to the topic of race relations are people like Candace Owens, like Dave Rubin. This is why I gotta say, I was getting mad at Bruce because he said, with everything that's going on, I'm thinking about going center right. I'm like, no, don't. What are you doing?
Dude, you got Sam Harris, all right?
We can't abandon the left. This is what I say. Like, we need to reclaim the left and not abandon it. Like, this is the important part, because economically, I'm left. Socially, I'm left. I have no reason to go right. I don't have any reason, and I cannot conceive of myself ever going right based on what I understand about fiscal policy, based on what I understand
Certainly
about
no.
social issues. And so seeing what's happening to my side, and I will say it is a minority of what's going on, but they have so much, because they're so loud, they have so much institutional and narrative power that's the direction that everybody thinks the left is going in. And I'll say the same thing for like the Black Lives Matter movement, where most of them are just out there, I think, because they see perceived injustices within the black community. It's not just about police shootings. It's just the general attitudes that people have towards black people.
Sure.
And with that, and that's the thing that I say, like, if that's what it is, sure, I'm on board. Like, I don't care.
I think perceived and real injustices, right?
Sure.
I think,
yeah.
Those two
absolutely.
things play into each other.
But that's not what. But when I look into what the grander narrative of BLM is, what is being shown on the news, what is being shown on some of their organized websites, such as them wanting to dismantle the nuclear family, them wanting, strict reparations, then we start to have. Then the narrative seems to shift towards in that direction, and that's what's happened with the left. That's what's happening with this movement. That's what's happening even with the right sometimes when it comes to the topic of. Creationisms in school or something like that, and they'll immediately associate the right with that. Even with the recent talkings of trying to tear down Confederate statues, the right is almost anonymously associated with those Southern bigots that want to keep these statues. I mean, for the most, sure, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's most of the people on the right, but I know a handful of people on the right that are okay with tearing them down because they view them as traitors. Colin Moriarty says this all the time. He's a conservative, and he says, no, tear those statues down. They're traitors.
Yeah.
Why would anyone even want to have them? And so I think what happens, sorry, I know I'm ranting, but...
No, you're good.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
I think what happens is that these two sides get captured by a small vocal minority, and now the narrative changes because of this. And so that's why I was getting mad at Bruce. I'm like, do not... if first of all, if you're like fiscally conservative or socially, go for it, go to the right. But if you're not, and from what I know about you, you're not, why would you ever consider leaving the left? We need to reclaim it. We need to make sure that they don't run away with this narrative.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, because okay, to back up a little bit, I used to be a fan of Dave Rubin. I can't stand him anymore. He's just gone off the rails and
captured by his audience.
Captured by his audience, and just being an oversensitive something else. I'm not gonna call him anything else here, but like dimwit. That's all I'll say. And like Candace Owens can't stand her either. She like I view her as someone who just likes to stir up a crowd.
I mean, she's a grifter, right? Who knows what she actually believes, but she's saying things that get attention.
Yeah, and that's I can't stand. That's one reason I can't stand her, because we need honest actors on the stage right now, and I don't view her as someone who is there in good faith for the most part. And Dave Rubin, I lost hope for him a long time ago. The thing is, okay, so when I say center right, I know that would get a knee-jerk reaction from a lot of people, but like they say that the woke culture is only a small fraction of the left, but you see their narrative just everywhere now. You see Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility. That book is like just pure poison and being thrown everywhere. And most people don't think deeply about these issues. And most of them out there supporting BLM are probably out there supporting them for reasons that I definitely support. Like, I definitely want to see I want to see black people treated just equally as any other ethnicity. I don't want there to be any kind of unfair treatment. I don't want to see discrimination due to race. All of that. But when we start getting into some of the thornier issues like reparations or defunding or abolishing our police departments, hey, we have to have a serious discussion about that, because that has ramifications. And I don't want to hear like the check your white privilege accusation used to sweep aside any kind of fine discussion, like we saw on CNN. Did you guys see that clip?
Which one?
So someone was asking a genuinely concerned question on air on CNN, and said, like, what if people need to call the police department because if someone's getting raped, if someone's getting assaulted, if someone's breaking their homes, what do we do about that? And the individual just responded by asking that question is a form of white privilege. Like, what are you talking about? That's a genuine question. That's a genuine question that is definitely going to affect people, and not of any one skin color.
I mean, white people have opinions. Like,
Yeah. Well, the deal is, so I see this as just having infected the left so much that and the reason I said I could probably go center right at this point is because the political dimensions between left and right, between Democrat and Republican, they've never been static throughout history. There was a time when I think the Republican Party had a liberal wing, but there was a huge reallocation, I think, back during the 1960s because of the employment of the Southern Strategy. So you had the Republicans almost became exclusively conservative, and most liberals shifted over to being Democrats, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, it doesn't seem to be there does seem to be some kind of realignment going on, but between authoritarianism and those who still believe in liberal principles. So you see alliances being formed between people who don't agree on much in policy, in political policy, but they still hold true more or less to the values of free speech, of liberal values, treating people as individuals and not atomizing each other by society. So, if does that even mean anything on the left anymore? And doesn't it is going to the center right and being conservative into the point that we want to preserve those values a more honest position to hold. Now, I'm not talking about going all the way over as to being someone like Dave Rubin or Candace Owens or, God help me, Donald Trump, who probably isn't left or right, just this big con man and criminal. But I'm talking about, and I hate to quote him on this, but preserving my liberal values is now a conservative position. There's some truth to that, I think. And I'm a liberal. Almost all my values, all my social values are certainly liberal. But seeing how J.K. Rowling is being raked over the coals for having a difference of opinion, in spite of being in support of the LGBT and transgender community, and being someone who's so progressive, and seeing her just get burned alive by people who are are fanatics for social justice. I don't know if I can, I still consider myself center left, but I don't know what's left of the left. I really don't.
I think you could be center right on Twitter, but in the real world, I don't think it's quite as bad as it seems. I just think that the internet interactions where J.K. Rowling's being raked over the coals are rough to see and disheartening, but most of the time when I talk to people, it goes okay. It's much better than online. People are just on edge, but it's much better. Maybe it's because of where I live. Maybe Colorado is just a more chill place than a lot, but maybe that's just my natural optimism. I want to believe that, but I do think that there's something particularly terrible, about the way we communicate online. And that's not a unique observation, but it's just, I think a lot of the, bad words said to people would not be said in other mediums. And then, just in the broader question here of where do you go politically? I don't know, man. I agree with both of you to some degree because I just feel so confused. I've never felt more confused in my life about what's happening.
Yeah.
I don't know whether to vote for Joe Biden. I don't know. I'm definitely not voting for Trump. That's off the table. So for anybody listening, but it's like, would voting for Joe Biden just be rewarding this system? Like, this is so bullshit that we are presented with two such shitty choices again. I don't know how to make that decision. It's tough to be. I mean, I'm leaning towards voting for Joe Biden for practical reasons, but it's tough to be presented with two shitty candidates again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going Joe Biden without a doubt. I went for Hillary. I went for Joe. One party is on the side of Bruce was. It's funny because Bruce was the one telling me these things. Like, just for practical reasons, we got to vote for Joe Biden, just based on the Supreme Court judges themselves. But
Yeah.
I want to grill you a bit more, Bruce, because
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I don't mean to be a douchebag.
It's
But
okay. Yeah, that's fine.
what liberal values has it become a conservative position to defend?
I think they would say free speech, right?
Yeah, I think he froze.
Mm.
Uh-oh. Ugh, Mars.
I like his thinking face, though.
Yeah, this is. I'm gonna screenshot this.
That's pretty funny.
Let's see. Wow, it's been a while since this actually happened. Usually, this used to happen when we had like Peter Boghossian on, and it was a shame, but it hasn't
Yeah.
happened in a while. So, dang it. He's probably talking too right now, and he has no idea that he's frozen.
Does
Where?
it normally catch up, or does he have to like hang up and get back
Yeah,
on?
usually
There he
catch.
is.
There we go. Hey, so
Yeah, there
you cut off right before you gave your answer.
We heard nothing.
Yeah, we heard nothing.
All right. So, free speech is definitely one of the things that I would say is one of the values I would consider a liberal value that I stick up for. Now, there's an argument to be said that no one owes you a platform. It's not under attack because you can say whatever it is.
Oh no.
Wow.
People denying you platforms, it's their right. But you can make those arguments on social about social media platforms. But social media platforms, bottom line, have gotten so large, so bloated, and everyone uses it now that there's an argument to be made. Those are now public squares, and the idea that that Facebook is now filtering what you can see, just that they can slut shame you for wrong think and for better or worse silence you um, is a position that just seems to be similar, that seems to be popular around liberals now. I'm actually seen some liberal people just shit over John Stuart Mill's idea of being able to exchange information through the marketplace of ideas, and a lot of liberal people actually think that's a good idea. No, it's not a good idea. This founding value of free speech is what allows you to speak out for civil rights. I mean, there was a time prior to the Civil War where people were saying where you're offending the populace, you're stirring up revolts, you're offending people. But okay, those people were Southern plantation slave owners. And this is at a time when slavery was considered just normal, an everyday thing that people accepted. Well, if people were making those same kind of arguments of like you're offending people, you're offending people's cultures or whatnot. If we didn't have that ability to speak freely, then I think we like right now we could still be owning slaves, and the left seems to be so willing to just shit on that, and with the tinderbox that was just set off by the George Floyd killing, I think this is just running rampant on the left now. I hope I'm wrong. Yeah, but that's what I care about fundamentally, and the idea that they're now atomizing us by race. I mean, these are not one of my values. I want to see us. I want to just treat everyone as individuals, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your sexuality, and it just seems like the left is betraying that.
Yeah, but I mean, the right is doing it. The right is much worse for like actual minorities in terms of policy, isn't it?
The mid to far right, I would agree, but I think, like, when I say center right, I mean, like, I have people who make that association, and if you talk to them, they're almost entirely indistinguishable from someone we would consider liberal.
But the right doesn't care about free speech. They only care about free speech when it's in their favor. Like, look at the topic. You know
Kind of
what the right
agree.
also wants to do? The right also wants to ban flag burning. I mean, Trump and his acolytes even went so far as to say that it should be illegal to do so. The right wants to dismantle the wall between the separation of church and state. Like, you can find these things on the right as well, but because they're not as pronounced or they don't come across as pronounced, we simply associate it with the left. Like, you think if Ben Shapiro had his way, you think we'd suddenly see these liberal values of free speech all over the place? No. I mean, Dave Rubin claims to be voting for free speech all the time, yet he refuses to platform people that would disagree with him, and yet he consistently complains about people on the right not being platformed. It's only when it's in their favor.
No, I agree. I agree. And like and I'll add to what you're saying, Vince. It's like, when Trump held his rally a few days ago, he came out against free speech about like he was just shitting on the left, but then he said anyone who burns the flag or anyone who burns the flag should be put in jail for a year. I'm like, but that's fundamentally against American principles. And that, so, no one cares about free speech. They only care about silencing someone else when someone says something naughty they don't like.
So here's my answer
Yeah.
to our question: reject both parties and do something else because the system sucks.
Are you a populist, by the way?
I don't know what I would call myself because I am not all that optimistic about human intelligence on the whole. Like, I think, if you've met a person of average intelligence, imagining that there's 50% of people who are stupider than that is disheartening. But that sounds bad. I think there's a lot of people out there who are very focused on themselves because it's natural to be, and it takes some sort of impetus to move beyond those boundaries. And I'm not all that positive we can do that. But I do think that we can make a better system than the one we have. Like, I think it seems like all of us would have loved Andrew Yang.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he would have been someone different. But in some ways, he is more similar to Trump than Hillary Clinton. He is, or what Trump pretends to be fair.
Like anti-establishment?
Yes, Trump's not actually anti-establishment, but that's his message,
Right.
And so if we could get someone like that, because it's so crazy that whatever you think of Bernie, the DNC like fucked him in 2016. It doesn't seem like the left has the will of the voters in mind, because I agree with you saying like the people in power are saying all the wrong things on the left. The media, Hollywood, politicians, the whole Elizabeth Warren 15-year-old trans person, having veto power over a cabinet member is so bananas. And that's a perfect advertisement for someone who could vote for Trump. And so I don't know what to do about the left, but so let's just pretend that I'm right for a second and that abandoning the current system is the way to go. I'm not saying that is correct, but let's just imagine it is. That isn't voting for Biden just going to reward the current system? Doesn't that just feed right back into the cycle? I mean, yeah. I can't vote for Trump, but dude, some third party person, like, let's get a Ross Perot in here last minute and I'll vote for that guy. I don't know what to do.
It's ironic because like I think because of the lack of the ability to have an honest conversation about anything related to ethnicity has led us to this moment, a very dangerous moment. But also because of the back and forth between the left and the right, and what I'm hoping for is that people are still relatively reasonable in the middle. With how fed up people probably are, the environment is almost certainly ripe for another option to come into play.
Something different, yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys listen to Brett Weinstein's Dark Horse podcast?
I've listened to a couple episodes, yeah.
Have you heard about his Dark Horse duo? Like, he was talking to Joe Rogan about it, and about like how like he wants to draft two people he considers patriots and set up some kind of.
Yeah, I did hear about that.
Yeah, he wanted Admiral McRaven from the center right. He wanted like Andrew Yang from someone who center left, and have those two just create their own thing. I don't think it's going to get off the ground. But
No.
if it does, I think they could garner quite a bit of support. But
I
right
like
now, it's like, yeah, it's a shit sandwich. I mean, I will probably end up voting for Biden and hope the hell I don't regret it.
Me too.
And because I want the Supreme Court to stay, I want there to be a few more liberal judges on the Supreme Court.
It's a very compelling argument.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but once that's been taken care of, then in the 4 years between this and the next election, no, just get busy getting a third party together because we're in a shit sandwich.
But they're going to feed us a Joe Biden again, and they're going to tell all
Yeah.
the supporters that they were successful because the Supreme Court's the same. And then they're going to continue to fuck poor people and give all the pharmaceutical companies money. Like, all the same things are going to happen that are happening now. You know, I don't think we can pretend that's not true.
Yeah. So to answer,
Yeah.
go ahead, Bruce.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So to answer the question, why would I vote for Biden if he's just this establishment schmuck? And I do hope that my view is not as myopic as a lot of the populist left are claiming it is. So people like Crystal Ball would say something along the lines of, as you guys are saying, basically, if we vote for Biden, that's basically just a signal booster towards the establishment party, that they can just as easily implement another Hillary Clinton, another Joe Biden, another neoliberal shill into the presidency. And I hope, I'm nowhere near as pessimistic about the organization as they are. I'm pretty, I said I'm economically left and I'm socially left. I'd probably place myself sort of, I guess, Steven Pinker politics, I guess. So like center left, right? So I'm not like Bernie Sanders or anything like that. When I took
Yeah.
there was a test just for the sake of conveying what my political affiliation is. When I took the test online that said which candidates do you most closely associate with, or like do your views align with the most? The most was Andrew Yang by far. I think I got like 19 points on him.
Me
Second
too.
Second place was Cory Booker, I think, and third place was Joe Biden. So I'm in that camp of neoliberal shills that they hate. But I'm still trying to learn, right? So I'm like, maybe if I learn more, I'll join their side, but who knows? So I'm not as pessimistic about the establishment as they are.
You seem too honest.
I'm a Pinkerian optimist, I guess. Yeah, too honest. But if I did have that populist mentality, so let's just say for the sake of the argument, I'm a Crystal Ball populist, I'm a Jimmy Dore populist, I'm a
Sure.
David Pakman populist, so let's just say for the sake of the argument. I would be concerned about that. And I would hope that even though that I vote for Biden and I support voting for Biden, the message coming across that Trump is bad and he is just a catastrophe towards United States politics, towards
Yeah.
United States foreign policy, is a much bigger signal booster, a much more important signal that we need to flare up than the signal of being anti-establishment. So it's a matter of what do we want to be vocal about? Do we want to be vocal about being anti-establishment and going against the neoliberal shills, which would be not voting for Joe Biden, or do we want to signal boost the idea that Trump is a huge catastrophe? Which one's more important? So I would say, and again, I hope this is too myopic of a view, that the fact that Trump being such a catastrophic president is a much bigger problem than having another establishment president in the next 4 years.
That's a compelling argument too. I don't know if you're wrong or if I'm right or
It's a hard calculation, yeah.
It's one of those positions where I don't know what to do, And honestly, I bet if we were to talk about policy, that you and I would agree on a lot, because I would consider my politics more Steven Pinker than Jimmy Dore. But I think that
Likewise.
it is like if I had my ideal, but I think we are so far from the ideal. Just Citizens United, just that Supreme Court case that allowed corporations to act as people and donate to campaigns. Yeah. I think is the single biggest problem in the United States democracy. Mm-hmm. I spent one semester of my college at an internship at a campaign that was trying to overthrow Citizens United, overturn, and basically we were going county by county in Iowa and Washington trying to pass local resolutions in little towns, and then eventually it would be the whole county, and then 68,000 years down the line it's going to be the whole state. That's what it felt like. It just felt endless because that has to either be overturned by the Supreme Court or it has to be overturned by a constitutional amendment. And so I think, again, a reason to be confused. We need the Supreme Court on our side. Joe Biden's probably more likely to elect people who would overturn that. But is he really? I mean, or is there a lesson that needs to be learned from the people in power that we are either not going to take this or the curtain's going to come down on the corruption? I don't know what to do.
I think we're in just really rough straits overall.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not just talking about the voting aspects. It's just like I don't know if you guys feel this way. I mean, it was never a fully cohesive, well-defined group to begin with, but the whole IDW crowd seems to have disintegrated. When we need those kinds of those dialogues more than ever. I'm like, what the hell? What like? Well, no, I know where he is. That's not fair. That's not fair of me to say. Jordan Peterson has pretty much disappeared from the scene. I'm not entirely I do like him, although I'm not a fan of like all of his views. We need people to give us some kind of social muscle out there to really push back on the excesses of the left and the right.
There's real life consequences to that, though, right?
Yeah. And of course, there's the election coming up in a few months, and why it does seem that Biden is really pulling ahead of Trump. Although I do not trust the polls at all. I think we're heading for a repeat of 2016. Election night's going to come, and everyone's going to say, "What the hell's going on?" And like, we're going to end up with a Trump victory, which I hope I am wrong, but I'm fairly confident I'm not.
I think that Joe Biden. This might be a controversial opinion. I think Joe Biden has a higher chance of winning the presidency than Hillary Clinton did, by a long shot. And because of that, Hillary Clinton had a 98% chance of winning. Crazy, but because the fact that Joe Biden is much more well-liked, people associate him with Barack Obama. And let's be honest, the vast majority of people on the left are not populists. Like, that's why it was so strange to me when I saw someone like Elizabeth Warren say that, what was it, trans women of color are the backbone of society. Like, you understand that is aimed towards 0.01%.
Yeah, 17 total people.
17 total people, and that's not to say that like that I don't support those people. Of course I do, and it's funny. I always gotta like preface some of these arguments.
We all do now.
Yeah, you have to, but it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
They will not hear this part.
Like, that's the thing. Like, I always say, like, no, like, I am someone who agrees that our attitudes towards women need to change. I am someone who says that representation generally is a good thing, but
now
they still don't care, and they don't care.
Yeah.
And so, that's why it's so strange to me when politics started becoming infested with this intersectional theory by people propping it up, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Kamala Harris to some extent. Yeah. It's so weird because I'm like,
I'll defend AOC.
Okay, go. Put a pin in that. I want you to defend her. Good.
All right, I'll defend AOC.
Yeah.
I think that, sure, she is, she's what, like 29 or something, right?
Oh, is she that young? Damn.
I think she's super young, like around 30, but very young to be in the position she's in, Mm-hmm. So, of course, she's going to be naive. Like, I am super naive, and I have no idea what's going on. She's older than me, so I feel like maybe has a little more idea to some degree if you were just to go by experience. And then, she did live a real life. She was a bartender and stuff. So I think to some degree, what I like about her is that at least she's a genuine person. I feel like she is telling us who she actually is and believes these things because she's around the age where these were being taught in school. And so there's something likable about her actually believing in her idealism, as, wayward as it might be. Whereas with the feeling you don't get any feeling with Joe Biden nowadays because there's not much coming out of there, it seems like. But the feeling you definitely got with Hillary Clinton was this gross robot, who only had political positions because this is what was going to put her in power.
Right.
Whether or not that's true, that's what people thought. But AOC is not that. AOC is telling you it seems like she's telling you what she actually believes. And there's something appealing about just that.
I agree with you, Killian, but like and you made a good point there that like she probably is sincere. You know, I don't know too much about her, but I haven't been impressed by what I've seen. I mean, like I kind of think of her from my perspective as as a mirror image of Donald Trump, someone who probably is a genuine person, someone who probably does care about the people under her, someone who's coming at this from a viewpoint of compassion, and that alone I can respect her for. Of course, you know, who wouldn't? What kind of decent person would not want that? But you can be populist in the same way Donald Trump is. He says the most absurd and just the incredibly offensive and racist things out there to stir up his base. Well, AOC might be coming at this from a good place, but she can stir up. And I kind of see her as a representative of the regressive left in this aspect. She can say and grandstand for things that sound good, that good people who want to see a better world will jump on, at which, you know, done responsibly and done with real epistemic knowledge, with real ideas, that's a good thing. But I don't see that in her. I think of her as a reverse Trump who says stuff that caters to a progressive audience, which is a good thing, but where's the substance behind that? Are the ideas sound? Does she sound well educated in these areas? Can she make these things happen? And
I agree with you.
Yeah, and I don't think so. Yeah.
I mean, I 100% agree with you that she has said many things that seem outrageous, and I bet if I were to talk to her and tell her my positions, that she would think I was a racist and would probably tell me that, you know? Like, I bet, I bet that she would say that, and that's a bummer, but, you know, okay, here's a way that I've started to try to think about things, and maybe this is not a good way to think about it, but if she was walking past if she was faced with the puddle, the drowning in a pond, Peter Singer scenario, where you're walking past someone drowning in a pond and you know you are compelled to save them. Donald Trump, there's no fucking way he would save that guy. No way. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I bet she would. Hillary Clinton, questionable. You know, that's how I feel about the differences between those three people, if we want to be, you know, judged on a scale here. Right. And, you know, that is, you know, getting into the mind reading way of viewing things, viewing the world. I understand that is not at all empirical, you know, but voting practically hasn't seemed to go well for us for a while. I don't think Obama necessarily represented the best of liberal values, you know, even though I liked him as a speaker and a president, and God knows he was better than Trump. But I just don't. I'm just not convinced that going for the questionable and the Peter Singer analogy, you know, imagining that that's a right way to think of things for a second is the way to go.
Yeah, I don't have an answer there.
But I agree with you everything you said about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in terms of criticism. You know,
yeah,
all of it.
Yeah, it's.
I don't think I would vote for her, but I don't dislike her.
Do you think people like her are the future of the party? So I'm of two minds on this.
Oh yes.
So I'm gonna try to. Because most people say, or a lot of people, I should say rather, would say that the reason why they're the future of the party is because those values that are espoused by people like AOC and Ilhan Omar, those are the values that are being expressed by the younger generation, and so when this younger generation grows up, that's who they're going to get into power. But I often wonder if, okay, on the one hand, that might be true, but also are these values or this sort of intersectional view of reality, is it just a phase in the sense that people will outgrow it? So these views are mainly cherished by people in their teens, by young 20s. As they get older, will they also just sort of outgrow these things, and because they outgrow them, people like AOC aren't actually going to be the future of the party? They just have this momentary glory where they're continuing to shine among just the younger generation?
I have no idea, man. Um, the I don't want to think that people get conservative necessarily as they grow older, because I know a
Right.
lot of old grumpy conservatives, you know.
Yeah.
So there's something appealing about college idealism, isn't there, in the sense of, you know, you want to, all of the social justice stuff, barring a few people, comes from a good place. All of the woke stuff comes from a good place, because you're presented with these actual injustices in the world, and you really want to act on them, but then you think the world is so black and white, and it turns out it's not, and that sucks, because you really don't know what to think about things if you, I think you really arrive into the right place, you know, because it's a confusing, you can have strong opinions on things, but I think ultimately the correct answer about what's happening is to be confused, because no one's got all the information.
Yeah.
But is it gonna get better or worse? I don't know. If Trump is reelected, I think the left, I think the Democratic Party might shatter. If Trump gets reelected, I think the Republican Party might shatter. You know, like, there's, what's going to happen if Trump gets reelected and all the people who think like Jimmy Dore and a little like me are about the corrupt system? What's going to happen then? I don't know. Are more people going to jump on that bandwagon? I think this time, you know, the pandemic has highlighted how unpredictable life is, and I'm not even comfortable saying what's going to be happening 6 days from now, you know?
Yeah.
I have no idea. It's hard. We are in actually unprecedented times, you know? People overuse that, but this is the situation in which we find ourselves.
It is an unprecedented time, isn't it? Because like we're put into a situation where the shit has hit the fan and reality is really staring us in the face.
At
Like,
least not for 100 years, right? In terms of unprecedented, but yeah.
well, we're now in a situation where like people are really starting to discuss the utility of UBI. Like, look how many people were out of jobs, and like
Andrew Yang, man.
yeah, exactly,
Come
exactly.
on.
And that like how people have to work from home, like, you know, education is being ported to the home environment. It's really forced a lot of change, and things are opening up. But like you know, we're just starting to open up again. I'm betting we're going to close down again. But that being beside the point, like
You think lockdown again, like full lockdown in California again?
I don't think that'll happen. I think it'll be necessary, but I don't think it will happen, because there's been so much ambiguous information that people are going to say like, no, you told us to lock down the first time, you're full of shit.
I mean,
And
it can't happen though, right? Just because
yeah,
I am in support of most I don't coronavirus measures. Pay attention to the scientists, whoever those are.
yeah, right,
I'm fine with whatever they recommend, you know. But we have no social safety net for the people failing.
right.
How can we actually go into lockdown?
Well, whether or not we can do so again, I'm thinking that we're not going to be able to, because, you know, again, like with all the ambiguous information they've given us, like they said protesting was okay.
I know.
Even with that, I'm like, come on, you just blew away the public trust. I understand it's important, but like now with the pandemic, no one's going to listen to you if we need to lock down again. And what are you thinking? So it's stuck being on a rock and a hard place, and now with this new information coming into play, it's gonna reverberate. Like, you know, what are we going to do about a social safety net now? How are we going to responsibly implement it? And how are we going to even pay for it? It's
no idea.
No. It's a time. The time is right for ideas. And again, we had a candidate with some unique ideas, right or wrong, but they were ideas.
Can I ask you guys a question that would take us in a little bit of a new direction?
Sure.
Go for it.
What do you guys think about the whole the rioting and the protests and the validity of, let's take Black Lives Matter at its best possible message, you know, that Black Lives Matter, you know, like, not the other stuff that comes along with it, like abolishing the nuclear family and the, you know, proto-communist stuff that's in their manifesto. I don't know what to think about the, you know, it feels as if we're being manipulated by the media with these videos, but the videos are horrifying and compelling, you know. Have you guys watched Dave Chappelle's special?
Yeah, I watched half of it.
Not yet, I don't think.
It's hard to get through because in one hand it's really emotionally compelling, but it's feels misguided, you know. I don't know. What do you guys think about this whole situation? I guess I'm gonna leave that on the table. I know that's it's off the deep end in terms of where we get to go, but
You asked for the best possible interpretation, and I would say that I'm on board.
yeah,
Because racism is still alive in our society. You know, I have several black friends who've had instances of it in their lives. Now, is there systemic racism? Probably, but you know, I want to approach it from a very, very nuanced point of view, because I don't think America is entirely systemically racist. I don't think that's logical. But if we want to talk about fixing specific ideas that are hurting the black community and weeding out the areas in our system that are systemically racist, I'm totally on board with that. Now, but you asked for the best possible interpretation of the Black Lives Matter, and those best intentions, I think, are what the majority of people supporting BLM are for, and nothing wrong with that. But when that is conflated with, you know, again, with abolishing the police, and whether or not the issue is between a systemically racist police force versus police brutality and a poorly trained police department, that is something I would argue is a nuanced question that's going to be heavily influenced by what we see in the media.
sure.
But as a whole, sticking up for, again, the best possible interpretation of BLM, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, best possible interpretation, of course. I mean, best possible interpretation of Antifa, I'd be on board, right? If it's just anti-fascist.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, as I said, if the direction that the movement is headed in towards is nothing more than a matter of shedding light on the fact that black people have it harder than everybody else, that there is a level of white privilege that exists, of course.
Yeah.
I don't think any person would deny that. But
No
if
reasonable people, yeah.
right. If that's
Right.
the direction we're headed in, yeah, of course I'm on board. But if it's headed in the direction in which we're going to focus so much on race to the point where now it's going to become to separate us even more and halt to the progress that's already been made, that's where it concerns me. But
Yeah.
best possible interpretation, yeah, I mean, even a moderately good interpretation of it, I'd be on board.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think best possible interpretation is really all lives matter. If you taken literally, you know, it's just treat everybody equally, like we were saying earlier, you know. I know that soundbite could be taken so poorly.
Oh, you're going to be canceled right after this, man.
Oh man, there's nobody. I have no audience. There's no one to cancel me from. But I agree with you on the best possible interpretation. But now let's talk about the reality. You know, like I think that. So let's talk in terms of systemic racism. Do you think? So I'm going the Glenn Lowry, John McWhorter route in that. Do you think that people of color have been taught to perceive people being assholes as racist, and that yes, there are real assholes in the world, and that B, some people are assholes just because, or there are real racists in the world is what I meant to say, but then some people are just assholes because they're assholes. You know, it's like both of those things are true, and I think that perhaps the socialization creates an abundance of interpreting interactions that way. That is not a statement I'm saying that I'm believing. That is just a question to put to you guys.
I'll take a stab at this.
Yeah.
Again, it depends, and I'm not entirely certain. I think you can probably say that it's a little bit of both. And one of the reasons I say that is this. When right immediately after the Floyd killings, there was rightly so much outrage out there about the about racism in our society, and there's a huge outpouring of support for the black community, which was great. But when we start touching on the ideas of political correctness and narrative versus evidence and facts, we're running into a problem, especially with the narrative part. And so what I was doing one day, I was flipping through my one of my social media feeds, and there was this line thrown out there by this Asian community, some kind of podcast or whatever that was being put out there, and they put out the sign Asians for Black Lives Matter. That got on the social media feed, they got a lot of backlash for that for some reason. And she says, I can't believe we got this person who posted it out there said, like, I can't believe we got backlash for this. This seems to be a positive message. Why didn't you, like, why are you guys so offended by this? I wrote them a response. I didn't send it because I wasn't sure if it'd be taken in good faith, and I'm pretty sure they're very woke. But what I find problematic about that is, like, what do you mean by Asian community? Like, are you talking about, like, in the broad strokes, like Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, whatever?
Asians for Black. That isn't. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. That is an interesting thing to say.
Well, the thing is, okay, like, you're talking about speaking for an entire community for one thing, and you're assuming that they're all on board with that slogan. Well, people will take exceptions to that. They will probably be, of course, for BLM, but also not for the BLM as a whole in the organization. They might believe in certain slices or whatnot. And so the problem with throwing everything behind a slogan is that the assumption is people have different ideas of what that means. I'm not saying that they believe in All Lives Matter or anything like that, but BLM has some controversial stands, and we were talking about earlier about the best possible interpretation. And if you're interpreting it from that angle, then yeah, of course, who wouldn't be for that? I mean, I'm for that, but with the controversy surrounding it, especially with the idea that defund means abolish the police, for instance, or whatever, then they're making such a broad claim and claiming that an entire community speaks for an entire community when that community in general is very, very split on their own opinions. We have black shopkeepers who had their businesses destroyed and who are lambasting Black Lives Matter and said you guys are hypocrites. I'm black and you guys just destroyed my business.
They also burned down restaurants in California.
Yeah,
like, that is not where it happened.
Yeah, I mean, but just imagine, like, speaking in slogans and speaking with the kind of audacity that you speak for an entire community, and that you speak for a community that you're assuming to share one huge cohesive opinion. That's
I mean, that's racism, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also arrogance, and it's not. It deals nothing with nuance, and going back to your question as to whether or not, like, they're, like, it goes back to answering your question. Is like not everyone in the community views things the same way. Like, you have people with dissenting opinions, even in the black community, about Black Lives Matter. It's not one size fits all.
I mean, Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter are ignored.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I cannot recommend Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter enough. Fun fact, I'm supposed to receive John McWhorter's book today that I ordered like a month ago. I forgot what it's called. I think it's called Being Black or something. But yeah, so it's a book that you can buy on Amazon for $85, but I managed to find one copy for $30.
Nice.
And it's not here yet. And I'm really mad about that because it was supposed to be here by 8 p.m. and we're 45 minutes away. Anyways, small tangent.
They're great, though.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, they're like the best conversations about race that you could imagine, basically, I think.
And I'm really inclined to agree with their analysis on race, on the general topic of race, because I've been told many of the same things that the black community is being told in regards to how they should perceive sort of slight sneers towards them or something like that as acts of racism. You know, obviously I'm of Mexican descent. I am not black. They have it much worse than I do. But I've been taught many similar things that they were. And I really empathize with what John McWhorter said when he was on the podcast with Coleman Hughes, when he said a lot of the things that he was told about race didn't seem to mesh well with the reality that he was seeing. And that's one of the things I really empathize with, because a lot of the things that I was told about being Mexican didn't seem to mesh well with the reality that I was seeing. I was seeing people in my community not succeeding academically, not because there was a system in place to go against them, but rather because there seemed to be a culture, a Hispanic culture, that didn't promote academia over work or over family values. I mean, we're talking about a culture that is stemming from a country that is, 99% Catholic, staunchly Catholic? That's a pretty big burden on education there as it is. Now, I'm lucky. I grew up in a family that did value education, so I did well in high school, and I did well, I'm at a university right now, pursuing a degree in physics. But I know that I am the exception among people of my race. Now, the good thing is that I went to a good high school, so maybe I didn't have any systemic barriers that other people did who went to a very poor high school in a poor neighborhood. And the reason why those high schools are poor and those neighborhoods are poor are for socioeconomic factors that are steeped in racism. And this goes back to the original claim of systemic racism. That might be true, but you also can't have that conversation without ignoring the conversation of personal incentives within particular cultures. I know for a fact that the Hispanic culture, or specifically Mexican culture, I should say, does not value academics as much as the Asian culture does. They don't value academics as much as white culture does. So you have to take into consideration.
Man, I could not say that.
Don't worry, I got you. So I often wonder,
that's crazy.
How different would the equation that we're looking at be different? How different would it be if we took those things into a factor? I'm not saying that we should ignore the other conversation about whether or not the fact that a lot of the schools that Mexicans and blacks go to are disheveled. They're really awful.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's absolutely a question that we should analyze, that we should question, that we should look deeply into. But we also can't ignore other factors. Otherwise, we're just going to have a completely miscalculated answer. But
that's where intersectionality fails, because it assumes that you're a failure or you're a success solely based on the basis of your skin color, which is a racist comment in themselves. I mean, do you guys follow Chloe Valdery at all? Okay,
I do not.
She made like this great Twitter post today, saying like, yeah, privilege. Make no mistake, white privilege exists. But it's only one form of privilege compared to so many others you can have. I mean, like, the idea, like, I mean, implicit bias is real. Let's face it. It does happen, and people.
100%.
I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. And like, people will probably look at you differently if you're walking through a neighborhood, if you're one ethnicity or another. But if we want to talk about this from a broader perspective, if you take someone who is black and he's on a coastal city, he's probably gonna be walking around life with fairly comfortably. He's gonna look upon with respect. He's probably gonna be treated like an equal wherever he is, as opposed to someone who's white, who's in the Midwest somewhere, doesn't have a job, was born into just a poor environment. You know, are you really going to go and tell that kid that he has white privilege and he has it better than this other guy in one of the coastal cities who has an affluent style of living? It'd be criminal to do that. And we can talk about advantages and so many different other aspects that give you either a boost up or a leg down in whatever sociological circles you happen to be in. I mean, if you're more attractive than the average person, you'll probably have an easier time getting a job. If you're taller, you'll probably be more able to participate in like basketball teams or whatever. So you have all these
natural hierarchies.
Yeah, you have all these competing hierarchies that just turn intersectionality and just rip it apart inside out. There's so many different aspects to the whole puzzle that if we want to atomize it by race, it just doesn't work. And it pretty much is reintroducing racism into our societies again, which is where intersectionality ends up with egg on its face.
So I'm going to say another soundbite in response, as it is going to be real bad. But racism is like the most natural thing ever, isn't it? I mean, I think one thing that people forget is that we are not that far removed from living in tribes in the grand scheme of evolution, you know? So it's unfortunate, but in our DNA, it was probably natural to react to people that look differently to your family with, you know, at least a raised heartbeat. And so you're fighting against some natural things, I think, with morality here, and that's what morality is, right? It's a fight against evolution. There's almost nothing about morality that is evolutionarily makes sense. You know, it would evolutionarily make sense to like rape people, and murder probably makes evolutionary sense in a whole lot more situations than it does moral sense. So we're trying to escape this situation in which our biology is telling us to live a certain way to some degree. But I think one solution for that, and for as opposed to emphasizing race in the way that the left and the right do on the extremes or wherever you want to put the people who annoy us, I think one way to do it would be to organize by class, not in a communist way of thinking about it, but just in the black poor person who votes Democrat has so much more in common with the white poor person who voted for Trump than either of them do with the rich person who voted for either party.
This is interesting. We have our first disagreement. This is exciting.
I'm excited too.
I think morality makes perfect evolutionarily sense. So originally, yeah, it makes sense on an individual level that we would want to rape as many women as we can to pass on our seed. But the whole idea is that you're not going to make it very far given the fact that we evolved within tribes. And so cooperation was an evolutionary calculation into our genetic code that had to be implemented. And that's why we see nowadays people feeling rightfully disgusted at the idea of racism, at the idea of bigotry, of prejudice. Because we, as Peter Singer documents this, you mentioned Peter Singer, the expanding circle war. Our circle of empathy is increasing more and more to the point where we're including not just people who have different skin colors as us, but also even different species. I mean, animals. Veganism is increasing in popularity because of this. And so I would argue that given that information, it makes sense why we are now having these change in moral attitudes, because the circumstances under which we have to cooperate with one another are changing. Now we have to include people of different races, which is a good thing, I would say. Now we even have to include different species, which I would also say is a good thing. I've always said that I'm a reluctant meat eater. Don't worry, I'll go vegan one of these days, I promise. But for now, I'm not.
So I switched back from being a vegetarian.
Oh, no kidding. What's the story there? I'm interested.
Side note, factory farming's terrible. Probably the greatest moral atrocity since slavery, in my opinion, if you go by just conscious suffering. But was a vegetarian for a while, and then, you know, I'm trying to run 100 miles, and I think that that's not the most effective diet if you really want to be a super athlete. So I'm trying to buy meat from responsible sources, and then I'm going bow hunting with my brother in September.
Oh, no. Going hunting?
Going hunting, yeah.
You're killing animals for no good reason? How dare you?
I mean, it's not for no good reason.
Joe Rogan.
It's to feed my family.
Oof. That's
At least you know how that meat's gotten, you know? Like, I mean, if you're eating factory farm meat, you're just eating an animal that was tortured.
Mm-hmm. You know who's a fun person to have this conversation with? Do you know who Armin Ababi is?
Yeah.
Hey, he's a fun guy to have this conversation about.
I've talked to him over Skype and such before as well.
Yeah. He's a great guy, has terrible optics. If you have him as a friend on Facebook, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, he does, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we're heading up to 1 hour and a half. I think this is a good time to end the podcast. Is there any last words before I end the Skype call and kill all of you?
No, this is a great call. I mean, like,
yeah.
I've been wanting to get Kilian on the podcast forever, since like I know that you know I've been on Kilian's podcast, and like I've been looking for us to grow our communities, because we definitely have our disagreements, but we also share the concern about the current political climate and the need to discuss the most unpopular things to further society along. And
certainly got there today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm finally glad that the three of us got together. I'm hoping to grow our tribe again.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, our tribe is growing.
Yeah. It was good to talk to you guys, but we gotta have a second conversation sometime, because we were in the middle of disagreeing, and I wanna.
Oh, actually, go ahead and go ahead and give me. Well, we can finish this conversation.
No, I mean the evolution. What you were just saying about evolution, I've never thought about it that way, and that is really compelling. And I'm not saying that it's like changed my mind immediately, but it's definitely made me question my own point of view here. But I do think that my first reaction in contrary, because that's just what happens, you know, your mind defends your own position, even though I'm happily willing to admit you might be right about this. Is that evolution's goal? Is evolution meant to cooperate with humans, or is evolution, I guess I was thinking of it on a more planetary scale, and morality seems to be doing bad things to us in terms of existential risk we face. If you consider morality to have contributed to the growth of society and dangerous technology like AI, you know, emissions causing climate change, nuclear weapons, yada, yada, yada. So, to some degree, I think that plays a factor. But that's my first reaction. I'm not sure how articulate that thought is. But again, I've never heard that point of view before, so I appreciate that.
I'd have to marinate on that too. It's interesting.
Kilian, if you get the chance, try picking up Peter Singer's The Expanding Circle. That book really expanded my views on morality, and I think that it ties into some of what you're discussing here. But Peter Singer's great. Yeah.
I'll have to do that. It was great to talk to you guys. It's nice to talk to people who aren't angry.
Oh, I'm angry.
Yeah, we're angry on Twitter.
I mean,
I'm taking a break on Twitter.
You know what I mean.
Yeah. All right, but yeah, thanks, Kilian, for coming on. You were absolutely fantastic. You can come back on whenever you want. If you want to come back on Thinking Out Loud or back on the Babylon Cast, you're absolutely welcome back on any of those. This was a fantastic chat, and congratulations on being the second person on the Babylon Cast. Look at you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was great to talk to you guys.
Likewise, brother.